Hello, this is Yeshua said my name, YSMN. What are the marks of a watchman on the wall or a watchwoman on the wall? What characteristics and tactics are we to look in those who are watchmen? Well, Paul complained that before his departure from this world, that grievous wolves would creep in and bring damnable heresies with them, meaning that the watchmen on the wall that God had placed were no longer doing their jobs. In ancient Israel, watchmen were placed on the walls of a city, and they were to alert the leadership, alert those living inside the walls, whether danger was approaching or whether there was someone trying to creep in that did not belong. One of the traits of a watchman on the wall is to pay attention to what is going on around them in their surroundings, and then to alert people what is going on. And what we will be doing in this video is discussing scriptures that specifically deal with watchmen on the wall. And I have a link for you down in the description section. It's a whole page full of scriptures that you can look at prayerfully that will show you what a watchman means to the Lord and how important that job is. So if you are a pastor in a church and you're listening to this, if you are a leader of any kind in a congregation and you are listening to this, I need you to pay attention, because this is for you. And it's also for any of you in your own households, watching what is coming in through your television, watching what's coming in through your radios or through video games or whatever. Be a watchman on the wall in your congregation, be a watchman on the wall for your home, for your children, for those in your family, wherever God has placed you. Part of being a watchman is paying attention to false doctrine, paying attention to when wolves that look like sheep are trying to creep in and bring in with them these secret, damnable heresies that are deceiving the church and deceiving people into believing them and believing these doctrines. So half of this video, I will be dealing with specific scriptures that I will be reading you about what God actually looks for in a watchman on the wall and what he expects of them. Do you know that there is a heavy penalty that God will hold at our feet if you are called to be a watchman on the wall? Not all of us are, but if you are called to be a watchman on the wall and you do not do your job, it does not mean that you'll lose your salvation or that God won't love you anymore. It just means that he'll hold you accountable for not being responsible for what you know and what he has shown you. And so I want to delve into some scriptures for you. And then at the second half of this video, I'm going to be dealing with a couple of question and answers about Freemasonry out of a book called 33rd Degrees of Deception, a book I have shown you over the past couple of videos. And I'm going to be doing a session in each video of maybe 2 or 3 question and answer sessions that are coming out of this book, 33 Degrees of Deception, that will answer some questions for those who are either thinking about joining Freemasonry or those who are thinking of coming out. So I'll be doing that in the second half of this video, so please stay tuned for that. However, the first part of the video, what I want to delve into is, what does God say about watchmen on the wall? What is their responsibility? And what happens if we do not hold to that responsibility? Well, let's find out. And the Word of God tells us what we need to know. Starting in Ezekiel 33, verses 1 to 33. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to your people and say to them, if I bring the sword upon a land, and the people of the land take a man from among them and make him their watchman, and if he sees the sword coming upon the land and blows the trumpet and warns the people, then if anyone hears the sound of the trumpet and does not take warning, and the sword comes and takes him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and did not take warning. His blood shall be upon himself. But if he had taken warning, he would have saved his life. So what he's saying here to Ezekiel is that certain men were appointed as watchmen on the wall, and that they were to alert the people, the inhabitants of those towns, of those cities behind the wall, of danger that is coming. Now, the watchman may be doing his or her job, but if the people listening do not take heed, then the Lord is saying here their blood is on their own heads. Ezekiel 3:17. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. Now, what did Jesus say in the New Testament? He said, what I whisper in your ear, proclaim from the rooftop. Isn't that basically what he's telling Ezekiel here? Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning. So this is a command to Ezekiel. I've made you a watchman. You will do as I'm commanding you to do. Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the sword coming, so in other words, this is talking about a watchman here again that's not doing their job, okay? If the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, so that the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any one of them, that person is taken away in his own iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So what is God saying here? That if he set you as a watchman on the wall, and you see danger coming, maybe there's a wolf in sheep's clothing trying to creep in, maybe there's a damnable heresy creeping into the congregation, or maybe through your home, or a doctrine being taught in a book or a movie or a television program, and you don't sound the alarm, that person will be taken away in their own iniquity, but he'll hold you accountable for not speaking up. One of the main reasons watchmen do not speak up is because they are afraid of the opinions of other people. They back down when persecution comes. They think to themselves, well, Lord, I know you've made me a watchman, but if I speak up, my family will hate me and despise me. If I speak up, I'll be ostracized out of my church. I'll lose half the congregation, or half my family will want nothing to do with me anymore. Who cares? Who do you answer to? Do you answer to them? They're flesh and blood just like you. Or do you answer to the Lord? If you're your own master, do you stand or fall? If the Lord has made you a watchman, or if he has made you aware of something that should not be going on, you should confront it. Even if the person does not respond to you, that does not mean you are not a success. It means that you obeyed the Lord in doing what he asked you to do, whether that person or people responded or not. Understand? So what it's saying here in Ezekiel 33:6, if the watchman, you, me, sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet of warning, so that the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any one of them away. So each one is important to the Lord. That person will be taken away in his own iniquity or his own sin, but his blood I will require at the watchman's hand. So you're not going to be held responsible for their sin, but because you didn't give a word of warning, you didn't expose damnable heresies, you didn't expose what the Lord has been teaching you, even though that person may be taken away in their own sin, he'll hold you accountable for remaining silent. Isaiah 62:6, on your walls, O Jerusalem, I have set watchmen. All the day and all the night they shall never be silent. You who put the Lord in remembrance, take no rest. And this is one of the scriptures that God used in my life when I started this channel. All right. He took me to Isaiah 62:6. On your walls, O Jerusalem, I have set watchmen all the day, all the night. They shall never be silent. You who put the Lord in remembrance, take no rest. You'll know if you've been called to be a watchman on the wall because it'll be a burning passion in you day and night. You will not want to remain silent. And it's like Jeremiah stated, when he became discouraged. And he said, I will not speak the name of the Lord anymore because as long as I do, I'm reviled for it or persecuted. But he said, if I remained silent, his word would burn in me like a fire, and I couldn't remain silent. So one of the traits of a watchman, if you know you're truly called, is that you simply can't stop. It'll just compel you and burn in you. And he's saying here, I have set watchmen, and all the day and all the night, the Lord is saying, they will not be silent. Isaiah 62:6. So my issue here, and I'll put a link down in the description section of these scriptures I just read you so you can look them over, is that if you are a pastor or you are a leader in a classroom, or you are simply teaching your children at home, or maybe you're being a witness in your family, if you're not warning people with what God has shown you and planting seeds with people, they may die in their own iniquity, but the Lord is going to ask you at the judgment seat one day, why were you silent? Well, Lord, I was afraid of what people would think of me. Well, Lord, I was afraid people would unsubscribe from my channel. I was afraid I was going to lose half the people in the congregation. I was afraid that I'd lose the good opinion of my family. Oh, well, I'd rather hear the Lord say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Who is it? The opinion of man or the opinion of God? Which is it? So I wanted to bring this word of warning that if God has called you into a leadership position or a teaching position, whatever that position may be, okay, and you and he know what that is between you and he personally, are you planting seeds to alert people to false doctrines, to damnable heresies creeping into a church? Whether it's the occult, the new age, ecumenism, Jesuit teachings, whether it's Freemasonry and men recruiting other men or women recruiting into the Eastern Star, are you paying attention to what is coming in? And even if, don't be discouraged, because this has happened to me before. If you alert people and they ignore you or they just dismiss you, guess what? You have done your job because the Lord sees what you've done and that you've alerted people and you've warned people. If they don't listen to you, do not become discouraged and feel as though you failed the Lord. I didn't do my job. No, you were successful because you did what God asked you to do. All right. If you, like he said, if you blow the trumpet and they choose not to listen, they're held accountable for themselves. You did what you were told to do. But if you are a watchman on the wall and you say nothing, you do nothing, you try not to plant seeds with people, he'll hold you accountable. So I wanted to read those scriptures. That is not just my opinion. That is literally the word of God. Okay? So getting on to the second subject of this video, I want to, this would be too long for one video, but I'm reading to you from, which is what I suggest very heavily, from this book here, 33rd Degrees of Deception. And this is written from a former high-ranking Freemason. He's a born-again Christian, loves the Lord, and he writes this book with respect and with love. And what I'm going to do is not only request this book, but for the next few videos, there is a question and answer session that goes on in this book. And I'm not going to get into all of them in one video because there's too many of them. So what I will do is I will start from the beginning of this question and answer session in this book, and I'll give at least 2 or 3 of these question and answers that were posed to this Master Mason here and read them to you so you can hear them, okay? And then I will end each video with these question and answer sessions over the next 2 or 3 sessions that we have together. This is actually part of this. I'll show you what this says here. This is on Freemasonry and the New Age, so and the New World Order. So I figured I'd show you where I'm reading from in this book. So let's start with number 1. Let me see. Does Freemasonry have anything to do with the New Age? Okay. And before we get into that, these questions are being asked to this man, Tom McKenney, who wrote this book. So I just wanted you to know they're being posed to him, and he gives his answers here. Before we get into this, though, I want to read from Matthew 6:23, which the author puts here, "If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness?" Masonry is darkness. And what Jesus is saying here, if therefore that light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? In other words, you may think you have the light, but actually you're still in darkness. And remember the question I posed to you in other videos where I stated that if Jesus is the light of the world, if he is the way, the truth, and the life, and he is the only light, why do you need to turn to the east? Why do you need to be a Mason to work your way up to the light if Jesus said, I will guide you into all truth? If Jesus is your Savior and he is sufficient for you and you are a Christian, why would you need to turn to any other source but Christ himself to be your light? That's my question to you. Question number 1. Does Masonry have anything to do with the New Age? And this is his answer. This is the author's answer. Yes, like Mormonism, the New Age and Masonry are definitely interrelated. As a matter of fact, they seem to me to be inseparable, the author says. Question number 2. How then is Masonry related to the New Age? And then he goes on to answer. First, I suppose it is necessary to again define some terms. New Age, quote unquote, is about as difficult to define precisely as the occult. We are bombarded daily with New Age propaganda. news items. Sometimes it isn't easy to tell the two apart, and we've gotten into the symbols before. Let me see here, reports and advertisements. We all have some awareness of it, but if asked to define it, we would find it difficult to know how to answer. Perhaps for our purposes, the best way to think of the New Age is a philosophical and religious system that had its modern beginnings at least a century ago. It is basically occult and esoteric. Yes, those two terms also describe Masonry, featuring a great deal of spiritism, e.g., contact with familiar spirits, automatic writing, spirit guides, etc. It is a feel-good movement denying such unpleasant matters such as sin, judgment, and hell. It recognizes a coming Messiah, whom they call Lord Maitreya, variously spelled but pronounced Maitreya, who soon will come to Earth somewhere from out there. And this has to do with the UFO alien phenomena, okay? And we'll get into all that in a little bit. It's also called the Age of Aquarius, okay, or the Age of Enlightenment. Question number 3, is there a New Age headquarters or a leader of the New Age? No, there isn't. There are many New Age groups with their individual leadership structures, and they cooperate a good deal, but each wants to be in charge, and there is no central authority recognized as such by all others. Of course, behind the scenes, they all have one central authority whose name is Lucifer, but most of them do not realize it. Now, I'll stop there, all right, because I don't want to read all of the question and answer sessions. They go on and on for quite a ways. But what does he say here? Those at the lower degrees do not realize that the central figure behind all of these Masonic lodges, all of these occult practices and organizations, what does he say here? Of course, behind the scenes, they all have one, quote, central authority, unquote, whose name is Lucifer, but most of them do not realize it. So he answers the question of, is there a New Age headquarters? He goes on to talk about, does Masonry have anything to do with the New Age? He says, yes, they're inseparable. How then is Masonry related to the New Age? And he goes on, and like I just answered you in that too, stating that the New Age and the Age of Aquarius, and also how the UFO alien phenomena is dealing with this coming Messiah, who they believe will come and bring them to an age of enlightenment. So he gets into that as well. But this is coming from a former high-ranking Mason who states here, like I've told you in previous videos, that lower-ranking Masons do not understand until they reach the higher degrees, okay? And I've heard this personally from ex-Masons, okay? That, like he states here, of course, behind the scenes, they all have one central authority whose name is Lucifer, but most of them do not realize it until the higher degrees. So we will get more into reading question and answers from this book, from this man. For those of you who may not decide to pick this book up, I'll be reading excerpts from this book for you. This is a very, very authoritative book that you can read on the subject of the deception of Freemasonry. And in ending this video, I have 2 questions for you. Again, actually 3. Could you invite Jesus to come to your Masonic lodge? Would you ask Jesus himself in the flesh to come sit with you in your Masonic lodge? Number 1. Number 2, if you are a watchman on the wall, are you neglecting your job in confronting Jesuit doctrines coming into your church? Are you neglecting confronting Freemason men that are in leadership positions in your church, whether deacons or treasurers or whatever they may be, because you're afraid of losing church attendance? Or maybe you're afraid of what family members will think of you? Okay, what are you afraid of? Or do you fear man more than God? We're all going to stand before God one day and give account of what he has given us. He gives us each a measure of faith. He gives us each a talent. And what are we doing with it? Are we burying it? Or are we using it for his glory regardless of how people see you and how they treat you? They're just people like you. Who cares what they think of you? If you know you're pleasing the Lord and you're putting a smile on his face, what else matters to you? If God has put you in, if he's made you a watchman on the wall, he has given you a responsibility, and he has actually allowed you to see behind the veil. He's actually pulling back the scales from your eyes and showing you a whole different world paradigm of what's really going on. Why? So that you can sit and revel in the fact that you understand these things? No. It's so that you can use it for God's glory and be a watchman and alert other people. And if you state that Christ is your only light, why would you think Masonry would lead you to a light or enlightenment or a light if you say Christ is your only light? If those of you who claim to be born again Christian men or women who are born again but yet attend the Eastern Star, why would you need to look to the East and join a form of Freemasonry to guide you into enlightenment when if you have the Holy Spirit and Christ is the one who says he is the light of the world, he who follows him will never walk in darkness, why do you need Masonry? Why do you need the Eastern Star then if you claim to be a Christian man or woman? And if you are a watchman on the wall, what are you doing with it? Are you a pastor? Are you a parent in your home? Are you an influence in a classroom teaching somewhere? What are you doing with what God has given you? Or are you weak to the point where you say, well, I can't stand up because if I do, I'll lose half my family. Or I'll lose half the congregation will leave. Or half the subscribers on my channel will unsubscribe because I'm too bold or I speak out too much. Oh, well, guess what? But one day you're going to hear from the Lord, why didn't you use what I gave you? And who are you out to please? Man? Or are you out to please Christ? Tune in for more soon, guys. Thank you for subscribing. Please open up expand the description section of the video for my contact information. And also for a link to a page of the scriptures that I read you about being a watchman on the wall and what God expects of you, and how to be a watchman on the wall and what he expects of you and what will happen if you do not use what he is giving you. All right. God bless you and thank you for tuning in, and more to come soon, Lord willing.